right. Hey, welcome all Rangers, Ranger lovers, and everybody else in between. We have an amazing episode today. Somebody that's near and dear to my heart. We actually had the pleasure of serving together where I learned a lot from him. He is truly somebody that has done a lot for his country. So Stephen Dellinger, Master Sergeant, retired Stephen Dellinger, joined the Army in 2001, August of 2001. So there's definitely some things we're going to talk about there. He has 3 Bronze Stars, 1 with Valor, and he also has 16 combat deployments with the 75th Ranger Regiment. He served in 175, 275, back in 175, and also in 5th RTB as well. So, Dell, as everybody calls you, how you doing today, brother?
Good morning, Sergeant Major, and thank you for having me on the podcast. Very awkward for me to talk about myself.
Hey, call me Mike. Let's start with that. All right, you're retired,
Okay.
brother. You don't got to call me Sergeant Major. That's ridiculous.
The title podcast is "The Legends of the 75th," and I don't consider myself anywhere close to that. But I definitely could talk about some true legends of the 75th that I surrounded myself around for the past 20 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's part of the reason we pull people on too. We pull people onto the podcast, and I use the word pull deliberately because so for everybody listening, Dell told me no. And I was like, wait, what? You're going to tell me no? Like, no one's ever fucking told me no before. Like, you're going to seriously not come on? He's like, man, I'm not a legend. I'm like, yeah, you don't think that. And I understand that. I don't think that anybody that comes on necessarily thinks of themselves as a legend, but it's not just about that. It's also, just what you said, Dell, is it's coming on and talking, not only about your time, but the people that just impacted you and made a huge difference in your life, and I think that that's a great place to kind of start, and I know you have a very, very interesting story of, why did you want to be a Ranger? Why did you want to join the Army?
Let's go back in time. I was living in Las Cruces, New Mexico at the time. I'm originally from North Carolina, but I graduated high school in Las Cruces, and I actually signed up for the Army my 10th grade year. So I was actually on the delayed entry program for 2
Right.
years. I came pretty close to just getting my GED and going in the Army. So I knew right away I wanted to be in the Army. I wasn't too sure what the Ranger Regiment was about. I wasn't read on to all that. I was originally from North Carolina. I wanted to go to college, didn't have the money to go to college right out of high school. So, join the Army, get some professional development, maturity, get some college money out of it. And I wanted to go to Appalachian State and Boone, because I'm originally from North Carolina. I wanted to end up back in North Carolina. That was kind of the plan. I went to the Marine recruiter first, just like I'm sure a lot of folks did. And they couldn't really promise me a specific job,
Yeah.
and they were like, hey man, if you once you graduate basic training, they'll tell you what you're going to be. And I wasn't comfortable with that. So I went and talked to the Army recruiter, which was right next door. And, I didn't have a high GT score on my thing. So I didn't really get the luxury of getting to pick what I want to do. So I got infantry. And I asked him, I said, hey, what's in North Carolina? I want to make my way back to North Carolina. He said, hey, we have a infantry unit called the 82nd Airborne. And I was like, okay, are they airborne? They jump out of planes? He's like, yeah. I was like, fuck yeah, sign me up. That's what I want to do.
That's awesome.
So when I signed up, I got my 3-year contract. I was going to the 82nd Airborne. That was my contract for 3 years.
Fun fact, I was as well. I didn't have an airborne contract. I was going to the 82nd also.
Yeah. So I take off the basic training in August of 2001. It was a lot of people joining in. This was before 9/11. So the 30th AG was just, it was a lot of people waiting to get through the pipeline. Showed up to basic training. My drill sergeant was a 375 guy. Sergeant Easterbrooks, he was a Somalia Bravo Company Ranger. Somebody that right away I had a lot of respect for. Very squared away guy. It's funny story is, during basic training, he'd come in there late at night, wake everybody up, banging on a trash can, and he'd tell everybody, y'all keep fucking up, I'll make sure you end up at the 82nd Airborne. And I'm sitting there like, towing the line. I'm like, what is he talking about? I got it. I have an 82nd Airborne contract. And right away I'm like, oh my God, what did I get myself into?
Yeah, no shit.
And so all my buddies that I naturally gravitated towards, they all had this thing called an option 40 contract. So all my best friends, and still friends to this day, had option 40 contracts. And we graduated basic, went on to airborne school. After airborne school, I had orders to report to 82nd Airborne. The bus was showing up. I had 24 hours to report. The bus showed up. I didn't get on the bus. I went with my buddies that I met in basic training and airborne school. They had option 40 contracts, and I went to the Ranger brief, which was behind, in between the buildings. And
Right.
it was a Ranger L&O. And the first question he asked everybody, there was probably 50 plus Rangers standing in formation, or future Rangers. And he said, "Hey, raise your hand if you don't want to be here." There was tons of kids raised their hand.
Really?
And I just said, "Yeah, oh yeah," tons of them didn't want to be there. And then kind of, as soon as the brief was over with, I kind of went up to him. I'm like, "Hey, how do I get one of those contracts?"
Oh, from the kids that didn't go. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes, "Hey, there's a building that has a bunch of patches on it. They called it the Patches Building." He said, "Link up with me over there tomorrow." Long story short, I didn't get on the bus. I was pretty much AWOL.
Holy shit.
Went to this building called Patches. He put me in contact with somebody that cut some orders for me over at a place called Splinter Village. Went over there, picked up my orders, and within 24 hours, I was throwing my duffel bags on the truck and reporting to RIP, the Ranger Indoctrination Program. I think probably something. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say. So, to get into Ranger Regiment, you went AWOL. That is a first. We haven't heard that one yet, so that's awesome.
Yeah, and I don't think many folks know that. And,
yeah.
I think maybe I kind of got ahead of myself. I think something else important to know is, while I was in basic training on the bayonet course, out there, thrusting, yelling, kill, we got called in and around the PT platform in a horseshoe formation. And the drill sergeant I was telling you about, Easterbrooks, he stood up there and he told us about, the planes hitting the World Trade Center.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
So I was on the bayonet course during 9/11, and we're sitting there telling us this story. And, for the last, couple of hours, I've been yelling, "Why does God love the infantry?" Or, "Why is the sky blue? Because God loves the infantry."
Yeah.
"What makes the green grass grow? Blood makes the green grass grow." And I'm screaming this at the top of my lungs, and I'm, stabbing a tire. And now this guy's telling me about some planes hitting some buildings. I mean, I kind of looked around. I kind of just it wasn't real for me. I didn't think it was real. And
because it's out of context when you're in basic training, I can imagine.
Oh yeah, I had no clue. And then when he started asking people like, "Hey, who's from New York City?" Some folks raised their hand. Who has family members that work at the World Trade Center? Some folks raised their hand. And they had the phone booths in the back, in the quad. They had the phone booths in the back at the basic. And I remember cleaning my rifle, and I could hear folks behind me crying on the phone. And that's when I knew it was real. And then they let us watch it on TV, and we saw it on TV. And, and we haven't even been issued a rifle or been to we haven't even been to the range to qualify or anything. And, they basically gave us a rifle. We built some bunkers on Sand Hill, and we all pull security. They issued us a live magazine, a rifle, and we pull security.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that's true. Because we locked down the bases. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
shit.
So I think that's something to be noted, before GWOT, when we got attacked, we didn't need all this specialized training. I was a young man. Give me a rifle, give me a magazine and some guidance, and we can defend. And that's when everything was real for me. Kind of fast forward back to getting that RIP contract. RIP was great. I don't think I really need to talk about that. It was 2 weeks in. It's a lot different than the Ranger Assessment Selection Program now.
Yeah.
But one thing I think is worthy of talking about is I knew right away from the first day that I made the right decision. because some of the, all the NCOs that stood in front of me, legends, that were representing the regiment, man, I was like, man, these guys are freaking giants, man. These guys are awesome. And I mean, of course, they smoked their ass, and but I I don't remember it being like that bad. I know everybody's got their rip stories and stuff, but I remember being, I grew up pretty hard. I mean, I grew up pretty tough, but I remember thinking like, wow, I made the right decision. I am going to the right place. And to be honest with you, I knew that I was lucky to even be there. So rip's complete. I arrived at uh, Fort Stewart, Georgia for in processing. That was March 2002.
Did
The S1,
you want to go to 175?
I didn't
Didn't really care.
care either or. It just so happens that everybody in my class went to 175,
Oh,
and
okay.
the only person that went to 275 was a cook, and that was pretty much it.
Gotcha.
So I arrived at Fort Stewart for in processing March 2002. S1 was supposed to pick us up on March 4th, but nobody showed up. The sergeant that was out there was like, "Hey, they're not going to show up until Monday." And that was the first time I went out and discovered what Savannah was all about. But as most folks that probably listen to this podcast, they probably know why S1 didn't show up. S1 was dealing with the first casualties of GWOT, Operation Anaconda, Takagar, Rangers Mark Anderson, Bradley Cross, and Matthew Commons. And that's why they didn't show up. And I didn't know that at the time. I'm just a brand new private, already nervous and scared because I'm about to show up to Ranger Battalion and I got to see who my first team leader is.
Right.
So we end up showing up that Monday. I end up going to Charlie Company 175, 2nd Platoon, 3rd Squad. My first sergeant was retired Sergeant Major Rick Merritt. My first platoon sergeant was Sergeant First Class, retired Sergeant Major Frank James, and my first squad leader was Staff Sergeant Tommy Williams, retired Command Sergeant Major Williams. So you talk about true legends. Those were my three, immediate in my chain of command. You're talking about people that I've become to admire a great deal, and
Yeah.
true legends. And then so we got there in March. I want to say Charlie Company just got off a training exercise. Alpha Company was deployed. We ended up doing a training exercise in New Mexico, and then we deployed in September 2002. And that was kind of the beginning of, the deployment cycle for the GWOT and for my time in the 75th Ranger Regiment.
So, talk about, just kind of the mentality. We're time removed now, but you're in basic training. You're one of the first class that shows up, after September 11th, not the first, but, you're one of the first, and they know that you were in basic training during September 11th. And it starts to very quickly for Ranger Regiment. SOF as a whole, we knew it wasn't if we were deploying, it was just a matter of when. And that was really the start of kind of the shift in mentality for a lot of Rangers and a lot of Ranger leaders, that we needed to think differently and be differently. Can you kind of just talk about that a little bit, going through, finishing up basic training and the mentality in RIP, and then showing up to 175, knowing, that they got one deployment under their belt and they're about to, go to another one.
Yeah, I mean, for mine, it's like one or two folks that had a Panama scroll. Nobody had any combat experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was a big deal. And we joke around with it, but we're like, we pray for war. But the Rangers train their ass off, and they train their ass off to go to war to prove themselves. And that's exactly the way it was when I showed up. I mean, everybody was really, really good. I mean, they've been through some really long training cycles. Like you're supposed to go to Ranger school within, first year within the Ranger Regiment. But even during that time, the war was kicking off. I was going on the second OEF deployment, and then we went straight into OIR, Operation Iraqi Freedom, the invasion of Iraq. It's like, oh my God, do we send Private Dellinger to Ranger School or do we go invade Iraq? I imagine as a leader that had to be a tough decision. So I ended up going on the invasion, and thank God, because I
Yeah,
didn't want
no
to miss.
kidding.
I didn't want to be that guy to miss that. And but I got sent home the last 2 weeks of during the invasion to go to Ranger School. So I mean that tells you how important Ranger School is. You know,
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah. Okay.
but yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question.
No, it absolutely does, and I like how you kind of segue that into Ranger School. Well, so by the time we invade Iraq, you'd already been to Afghanistan once. Done one Afghanistan deployment.
That's correct.
Okay, so you join the Army, and I hesitate to say it, but it's the truth. Almost during a kind of a peacetime. Now you're in the Army, and it's anything but peacetime. Your first 6 months, 7 months in Ranger Regiment, your first operational unit, you go to Afghanistan and you go to Iraq. Like, shit's real, man.
That's right.
you
Yeah,
know?
I can. That first deployment in Afghanistan, we were in Shkin. We weren't, we didn't have all these living conditions and chow halls and all this stuff like we have
Yeah.
now. I mean, I was literally, sleeping on a cot with my duffel bag on some gravel underneath it, and we were living in the vehicles and we were driving all over Afghanistan.
Yeah, we
And
were.
every night we would set up like a patrol base with the vehicles in 360. And then one fire team would get picked to go climb the biggest mountain to pull security. We set out our claymores and we have somebody, have security up, pulling overwatch for everybody while they were down there sleeping. So we lived on the ground and we ate MREs for 5 months straight. The first time I freaking washed my clothes, I think I washed them in a river in an ammo can. First time I got a shower was using those clothes to wash myself down from the river. I mean, we didn't have all the luxuries, obviously at the end of 20 years of deploying. So it was a lot different. I remember again, we used to have these piss tubes, and I was out there pissing in a tube, and I seen a RPG fly over my head and land in a mortar pit. So that was the first time uh, that we've taken contact, that I've ever taken contact and seen it, and it
Right.
landed right beside me. And I'm like, oh shit, putting up, it was BDUs then, so we had to button up the pants. And then I'm running,
that's an important part of the story. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So I'm running back in, and man, we alert everybody. We load up the vehicles. We had a Gustav gunner run to the roof. He shot off a Gustav round. I jumped in back of the GMV, and I remember my team leader asking me if I'm ready, and I remember saying, "Roger, Sergeant." And I've already had the pin pulled on the AT4. I was ready to get it on, and it was such a great feeling. We get all the way out there. Obviously, the person that did it's nowhere to be seen, nowhere to
Yeah.
be around. We didn't have ISR and all this, eyes in the sky to tell us where it came from. And we ended up going to this one house, and I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I guess it matters. Uh, we end up trying to breach this door to go in the house where we think it came from, and we couldn't get the door open. We end up knocking on the door, and and we're in the old school stack, right?
Yeah.
We haven't progressed into flowing
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So we're in the stack, and we're the whole 1, 2, 3 thing, and she opens up the door, and we're like, "Get out, get out!" We go in, we clear the house like we trained multiple times, and we had no breaching equipment. We didn't have ladders. We didn't have Hooley sledges, donkers, rabbit tools, all the breaching
All the
equipment that we
yeah.
advanced to,
We
right?
had boots.
I had a rucksack on my back.
Are
Uh,
you serious? Did you really have a that's
no, but that was the first deployment. I
yeah.
mean, I lived out of my rucksack.
Okay, that's
That
fair.
was
Yeah.
my house. Everything was in my ruck that I needed
Yeah.
for 5 months. Um, yeah, so I want to say that was the beginning of the evolution of if the GWOT's done anything great, it's definitely made us better at our
Mhm.
jobs because we have evolved, and I have personally seen it in the short period of time that I've been there. We evolved into night and day difference from that very first deployment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fast forward couple of years, we go, invasion of Iraq, come back, go to Ranger School, come back from there, go to another Afghanistan deployment. And then I think it was the 2005 deployment is when I became a team leader, fire team leader. I deployed as a Gustav gunner. And then by the end of deployment, I ended up picking up a fire team. And my squad leader was actually Sergeant Major Spencer, who's the
Oh,
one
really?
Sergeant Major, and my team leader was Sergeant Sulik. And I remember my first mission that we went on. We were working with the bigger brother, the Delta Force guys, and there was a hostage rescue mission, and they were clearing these buildings. We were clearing these buildings across the street, basically looking for this hostage, and it ended up being a block party. I mean, we ended up clearing like house after house after house. This is my very first mission as a fire team leader, and I had a shotgun. As a team leader, you carry everything. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I got my shotgun. I'm so fired up. I had like 28 shotgun shells, and I had a hoolie, I had a hoolie on my back, and I had all this breaching equipment. I'm freaking super excited, like pumped up.
Yeah.
Like I drank 10 Rippets and I'm just ready to get on. And as we're doing this block party, we're clearing multiple buildings. I mean, literally, 20 buildings. I'm shotgunning every door. Boom, boom, metal doors, wooden doors. Every door that I come to, I just shotgunned it. I don't even know if I checked the door. I was just shotgunning everything. And I remember I get to the rooftop. We end up climbing the ladder to the rooftop. We're clearing from the rooftop down. And I went to go to shotgun a wooden door. And it was like I only had one round left. And then one of the team leaders, who was a retired Sergeant Major Stoba, really big guy, he was like, "Get out of my way!" And he just body breached this door, and we continued to clear. And we were in a room, one of the prayer rooms, and it's pitch black dark. I'm in there, we're doing like SSC, and Sergeant Major Spencer, my squad leader, asked everybody in the room. They didn't know I was in the room, but they were like, "Who the fuck was shotgunning all those doors?" And then I remember my team leader being like, "Fucking Dell." His first day as a team leader. And anyways, I don't think I carried a shotgun ever again after that. Because I'm almost positive that every door that I shotgun, I could have opened, and with another breaching tool.
Yeah, but there is something to be said. It's almost like kind of like a teenager. Like if you could bottle the energy of like a 12-year-old, boy, like you could run a city. The same thing goes for like a brand new fire team leader. Like it's just blind ambition and brim, Firestone and brim and everything else. I mean, you're just fired up to finally be a fire team leader. Like you're just out of your mind excited. So, and then as time goes on, you learn, that you got to kind of quench that thirst a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely peeled it back a little bit. Even that same night, I remember clearing a basement, and the basement was full of water. And we're always taught speed, surprise, violence of action, dominate the room, eliminate threat, go to your point of domination. And this basement is full of water. And I'm like, you're not just not going to go to your point of domination. So I end up swimming all the way to my point of domination. But, there's a lot of psychological things going through. I'm like, hey, maybe the hostage is down here. I got to get to my point of domination. I got to clear this room, regardless if I'm neck deep in water. There was nobody in the basement.
Yeah, you think?
But anyways, I got tons of Ranger memories. But I definitely remember my first day as a fire team leader, and all the mistakes that I made, and just even talking about the shotgun, like how I took those lessons learned, and it helped me. 3 more years as a fire team leader, 3 more years as a squad leader, 2 years as a weapon squad leader, and then and those are the things that I passed on to my guys. That we how we evolved.
So if you will, maybe talk about like one of the deployments, as a team leader or a squad leader that really kind of forged you as a leader, like that really kind of impacted you and maybe changed your perspective on things.
I don't want to go into too much combat stories, but
Yeah, well, I would say that Dell tells some freaking awesome combat stories. You tell the best stories, man. I
well,
love your stories.
I'll peel it back a little bit. I think I was a squad leader for Sergeant Major Johnson, who's the regimental sergeant major right now.
Hmm.
Uh, Another influential leader that I had, phenomenal NCO. Um, it was coming near the end of deployment. Uh, you know, I would say like I feel like I was starting to mature as a leader. And when it came to tactics, CQB Battle Drill 6, like I felt like I was really really good at it. And one day he had to set me and another NCO down to talk to us, and I could tell it was going to be like a hard talk to. And before he even said anything, I said, "Hey, you want me to go over to 3 Charlie to be a weapon squad leader?" And he goes, "How the fuck did you know I was going to ask you that, Dale?" I was like, "Hey, I know that the guy that's over there, another phenomenal ranger that's up at Delta Force right now, Joe Pope. I know he passed selection and he's leaving, and they need an NCO to step in that position." And he goes, "Well, what are your thoughts on that?" And I was like, "Absolutely, that's what I want to do." And I remember him kind of like as an NCO, kind of like it took some of that weight off his shoulders because he had to pick one of his squad leaders, which you know, just like in 275, like you build that team. Everybody's great. You don't want to lose anybody. People in ACO or BCO, they need squad leaders, but you don't want to go, right? We used to call it, we had a saying for it, you're a victim of your own success.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
yeah, man, you can go here, you can promote, you can go up in the ranks faster, or you can stay here with with what you built and
Your
be the,
family.
your
Yep.
family and be great. So that's, to answer your question, I think that was a turning point in my life to like of maturity where, you know, um, they say, it's a leadership challenge when you go from platoon to platoon. And that is very true. Imagine going from, Charlie Company to Bravo Company. To make it even worse, try going from 1st Ranger Battalion to 2nd Ranger Battalion. That is a true leadership challenge. And I think once I got to that point in my career where I was comfortable to go anywhere to lead any Ranger, was a big turning point for me.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to talk about you coming over to 275, but before we do, we gotta take a stop at you being an RI. But that's one thing I remember. I remember you telling me this, when you came over to be a platoon sergeant, in Charlie Company. And I think we were talking about deployments. And yeah, we were talking about deployments, and you were going to be the separate platoon that was going to go away from the rest of the company. Um, for that deployment. And I remember you telling me, like, hey, whatever Ranger Regiment needs me to do. And I just remember I was like, God dang, not a lot of people think that way. Like, people fight me about changing squads as team leaders, and you were just like, hey, whatever the Ranger Regiment needs me to do. And then, in follow-on conversations, as we've developed our friendship over the years, you're saying, you've told me that, like, hey, the Ranger Regiment's always taking care of me. So of course I'm going to do whatever I need to do to support them. And there's just not a lot of people that think that way in the Army as a whole, but definitely in Ranger Regiment also.
Yeah, I remember you having to make that decision. Another tough decision for a leader to make, and I kind of saw it evolving uh, as it was happening. If you go back one deployment before that, I remember during the training cycle, my platoon, the Mad Slashers, 1 Charlie 275.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell me, I mean, you were the first sergeant, you could tell me, but I'm pretty sure we were the best platoon in 2nd Ranger Battalion, and we were not slotted to deploy that trip,
Yep.
and we got lucky, like literally 2 weeks before deployment, we got told, hey, Mad Slashers, you're deploying,
Yep.
and man, that feeling of like, man, all that hard work paid off. Our guys are deploying, and then fast forward back to when you had that conversation, it was Charlie Company's time to deploy, and you had to make a tough decision. And I think the reason, I know for a fact the reason I said that is because I just wanted to make my leader's job easier, right? I just wanted you to know, like, hey, whatever you want to do, I'm here to support. And what's best, for me is what's best for the battalion, and in that case, Second Ranger Battalion. Which reminds me of, like, when I became a first sergeant, Sergeant Major Spencer was the regimental. He worked up at regiment, and he sent me an email, and he told me, he told me a lot of great things, but he was preparing me to be a future first sergeant, and he said, hey, just remember this: whatever's good for your company, but's bad for battalion is also bad for your company. Whatever's good for the battalion, or whatever's bad for your company but good for battalion, is also good for battalion. I know that sounds twisted, but
No, I
if you really,
100% know what you're
yeah, if
saying.
you really sit back and think about that, I put that on a sticky note on my computer, and it was on the front screen of my computer for the entire time I was a first sergeant. And at first, I didn't really truly understand, and you don't understand until you're in that position as a first
Yep.
sergeant. Um, Absolutely, like, man, I got to give up an NCO to go be a RASP cadre. I can't give up a piece of shit NCO because he's not going to represent the Ranger Regiment well. And I
Yep.
remember when I went through RIP, I told you the guys that I saw were giants. That is the reason I knew I made the right decision to be there. And so I knew I had to send the right guy. And having that decision, the same decision you had as a first sergeant, I was having that decision with my guys, and it was not an easy decision. And I would tell you, if one of them would just been like, hey, whatever the regiment needs me to do, it would have been so much easier.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, yes, the Mad Slashers were amazing, and they were a phenomenal platoon. But I'm going to tell you, history has taught me that, well, time has taught me, I suppose, in leadership positions, that it's not always just about the platoon's ability or the company's ability or even the battalion's ability. It's about that senior non-commissioned officer. When they're working out on the fringes by themselves, that's the dude that matters the most. And so when I would advise, Captain Stahaley at that time, or Colonel Bartholomew's at that time, about which platoon we were going to have do these separated things from Charlie Company, I wasn't talking about the platoon. I was talking about you. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. I was, because that was a deciding factor, because I've gotten it wrong before, where I've went off the platoon, but the senior NCO, for whatever different reason, wasn't the standard bearer, the guy that was going to keep everybody in check. And they went off the reservation, and you had a fellow platoon sergeant that you probably remember that dude went off the reservation hardcore. So that was the time I got it wrong, but I've learned that that's actually what matters. So, just something to think about, when you talk about that kind of stuff. But I want to dial back, if we can, your decision to go and be a Ranger instructor. And I know that was also a very pivotal time for you in your kind of career, and it opened your apertures in a lot of different way. But again, what the Ranger needs me to do, the Ranger Regiment needs me to do, and what the Army needs me to do has always been kind of your MO. So, what was that decision based on?
Well, it's funny you brought it in that context, because now we got this thing we're calling it the charter, where but Rangers have always, once you've gone up in that pyramid, you've always gone off and did things for the big Army. But there wasn't a title for it, right? There wasn't this stigma like you have to leave when I made that decision. So the RI story, the reason I left to be an RI is for multiple reasons. Everything just kind of aligned up. It was for my family. It was to take a break. It was professional development and planning for the future. Just deployment before that, it was a 2010 deployment. My platoon, 3 Charlie, 175, we were the last platoon in Iraq when it closed out the first time. And we had a Delta Force LNO, Sergeant Major Weeks. He was there, and I became friends with him. And he was, at that point, I made a decision. Like, a goal of mine was to go to Delta Selection and be an operator. That's what I wanted. I made that decision pretty close to the end of my weapons squad leader time. And he started telling me about 5th RTB. He started because he was a Ranger instructor as well up there. And he told me it's the best kept secret in the Army.
Yeah.
And at the time, when I'm hearing these stories and I'm asking questions, I'm interested, but I'm not interested. I'm kind of like I like hearing what it's like out there outside of the Ranger Regiment, but I wasn't completely committed yet. I told you at the beginning of this podcast, I had a low GT score. I had to improve my GT. I became the headquarters platoon sergeant. My first sergeant was Command Sergeant Major Alba, and he wanted me to be the rear D NCO, and that would have been my first break at the time. And I think that was 2010, so I was on my 11th deployment, and so I started GT improvement. And then, but that was also a rough deployment for 175. We lost two great Rangers. Sergeant Patinos, Sergeant Katzenberg, and I was the casket NCOIC for both of those funerals. And I've been on target where Rangers got killed, Rangers got hurt, and it's different, right? Because you're focused on the mission and you know what you got to do and to move forward. But that was my first time ever being around the family members ever. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm not, grown man, but it hit me a lot different.
Yeah.
So both families, phenomenal families. And at the time, the Ranger Regiment needed me to be that casket NCOIC. And I pulled out the manuals, I pulled out the books, and I done rehearsals, and I didn't want to mess it up, right? Because you want to represent the regiment well, and you want the families to have good closure. And man, it took a toll on me. And at the time, I was slotted to be a future 3 Bravo platoon sergeant. And I was supposed to go to one of the first RASP classes that they had. And Sergeant Major Bielik was the CSM, who was also a former RI. So my company is deployed. I'm on rear D. I called on the red line to my first sergeant, and I had a conversation with him. And I told him, like, hey, I want to go do something else for a little while. And obviously I had a lot of things, family, obviously family's important. But that LNO's in my head telling me like, hey, it's a great place to get in shape, best kept secret in the Army. So I'm thinking family time, get in shape, go to schools, get my GT improvement, go to Delta selection. And then I was kind of like mapping out my career. So I made that phone call to him. And I remember the first thing he told me he said to me was like, hey, Dale, you're going to go be a platoon sergeant. That's what's best for you. And I was like, you're right. I've always had that mentality. Whatever the regiment needs, I will do. And that's exactly what I said. I said, Roger that, first sergeant. And I hung up the phone and then I had like this gut check and I ended up calling him back and we had a conversation and he was like, Dale, is this really what you want to do? I said, Roger that, first sergeant. And he goes, all right, I'll support you 100%. And, looking back on it, when you got it, in a first sergeant position, you got an NCO that's going to be a platoon sergeant. And that had to be a tough decision for him to have that conversation with me. And, but what I would tell you looking back on is he supported me 100%. And that's what happened. So that was a long story to, how did I decision to become an RI? Also, right after that deployment, Sergeant Major Smith, he was the brigade CSM for RTB, Ranger Training Brigade, which is now called ARTB. And he came and he was struggling getting RIs. He didn't have enough RIs. There weren't enough people going through school getting their Ranger tab to come be Ranger instructors. So he asked for volunteers. And he promised them a 2-year commitment. At the time it was 3 years. When I actually got there, it ended up turning into 4 years. But it was a 2-year commitment for guys from the Ranger Regiment that volunteered to go over there. So all the stars aligned. I got my orders and I went to go be a Ranger instructor. And for all the Rangers that listen to this podcast, I could tell you without a doubt, it was 100% one of the best decisions I made. I got to meet some of the best leaders across the Army, and maybe some of the worst. However you want to look at that.
Well, there's always, it's
Yeah.
always a mixed bag.
Was it a break? Yes, it was a break from deployments. Was it a break from work? Absolutely not. I freaking worked way harder there, way longer hours than I ever did in the Ranger Regiment. I mean, I was going on 32-hour patrols, 36 hours before I get home, sleep for 8 hours, turn around and do it again. And, trying to memorize all these classes. And oh, by the way, they made me a leader as soon as I got there. And, not only am I trying to figure out how to do my job, but I'm also trying to figure out how to be a platoon sergeant uh, at ARTB in charge of 17 sergeant first classes that outrank me in the Army. Clearly, in the Army longer than me. And, I was having NCOs show up late to work. And, at first I'm like, hey, don't make it happen again. Happens again. And then I'm sitting down with a 4856 counseling them, like, hey, man, like, sign this counsel form. Don't show up late again. It's just, I mean, these are grown men. And I say that, but ultimately, I did meet a lot of phenomenal NCOs there. I enjoyed my time there. I really got into hunting. Um, I really got into the outdoors. Even on my off time from not being a ranger instructor, I would go walk the AT trail
Yeah.
or constantly in the woods. I mean, literally, I was not behind a computer ever. And I was constantly in the woods with a rucksack on my back. And I'm influencing the future leaders of the Army. Um, you know, I didn't really know what impact I had as a Ranger instructor really until I got to 275 and I was a platoon sergeant for you and we were doing EIB. We changed the way we did EIB a couple of times and
Yeah.
we're on one of the lanes and every squad that came through from every platoon, every company, there would be some tab spec force say, hey, Sergeant, you were my RI. Hey, Sergeant, you're my RI.
Yeah, I
And
remember this.
Man, I started adding it up, and that was like 150 freaking specialists.
Yeah.
You start thinking about, okay, each Ranger battalion, how many that is. And then you start thinking about all the guys that went through IOBC, the officers,
Yep.
the impact you have on anybody that has that Ranger tab is crazy. So, we talk about networking, during my transition. Well, just taking that 2.5 year stint to go be a Ranger instructor to do some soul searching. Man, I literally know every senior leader across the entire Army because I was there. We get people tell us all the time, like, hey, if you got your Ranger tab, you're the top 10% of the Army, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was there with the top 10% of the Army. It's crazy, the networking. So I did do GT improvement while I was there, uh, and I got a 109 3 times. And at the time, that's all you could only do it 3 times. I think the Army changed it just recently where you could take as many times as you want. But at that time, it was like a saying to me. And to be honest with you, it was my wife that said, hey, you are miserable. You need to go back to Ranger Battalion.
Yeah.
So I went in. Sergeant Major Bielik was the RSM. I think it's worthy to note that before I became a Ranger instructor, he was a CSM, a 175. And when he pulled me into his office when I wanted to be a Ranger instructor, and he talked to me, I felt like it was 3 hours. I was at Prairie Rest, and he was giving me classes on the dry erase board, react to contact, knock out a bunk, all the stuff. And then I remember him telling me, like, hey, when you become a Ranger instructor, don't be a lazy RI. When you're in that patrol base, keep your nods on, make sure the guys are doing the right thing and keeping your eye on them. And at first I didn't really, it's all so real. I didn't really understand what he was saying. But when I got there, boom, it clicked, right? And what's crazy, let me tell you the impact Rangers from the regiment have. When I got there, there are still people that talk about Sergeant Major Bielik, Sergeant Major Craig Bishop.
Yep.
There's people that still echo the name. Sergeant Major Cannell is a 375 Sergeant Major. They're legends in the RTB community, and they only had a short impact there. So fast forward, here I am in his office, you know, and at the time, regiment was a 105, and you know, I had a 109, and anyways, I'm at parade rest again, and I'm like, Sergeant Major, I want to come back to Ranger Regiment. He's like, which battalion do you want to go to? I said, whatever the Ranger Regiment needs for me. And then he, you know, he told me to go talk to the recruiter out in the, you know, the cubicles. And I remember him coming back there probably 10, 15 minutes later, and he's like yelling across the room. He's like, hey, what do you think about 275? I was like, 275 sounds great. I'm at, you know, I'm at Prairie Press across the room, and he's like, good, because Sergeant Major Flino remembers you and he wants you. And I'm like, okay.
Where did you work with Felino again? I can't remember.
So
He told
yeah,
me this
so
story one time. I can't remember.
Sergeant Major Flino was the ops sergeant major at
Oh, that's
175.
right. That's right. Yeah, you guys had
I was the weapons squad leader, and Sergeant Major Flino was there. He was an OC during one of our platoon live fires,
that's right.
and he was sitting there listening. Not to go too deep into the story, but I
No,
think this is how he.
it's a good story. It's actually
Well,
a
I
good
think this
story.
is how he remembers me. I'm not sure. But basically, we had like two different things going on a range, and I was like, "Hey, can I ask a question?" I was like, "This looks like two different live fighters. Like
Yeah.
we're not really supporting each other." And I remember him just being like, "Thank you," and then walked away. And basically, he was saying like, "Yeah, you're right, Dell," and I think that's what he was trying to get
Yep.
across to the leadership. Um, and and again, Sergeant Major Flino, another freaking legend. Like, and when I think of live fires, every live fire that I've ever done, I remember every AR comment that he's ever gave me during as an ops sergeant major, as the CSM when I was a platoon sergeant, and those are the things that I've taken, and you know, I put it in my kit bag, and then when I'm OCing or I'm talking to the guys, I pull that stuff out, and but absolutely,
So
yeah.
that story on that live fire. So when I was Charlie Company's first sergeant, and I pretty new, I'd probably just taken over. He goes, "Hey, you're going to get this guy, Sergeant First Class Dellinger." I was like, "Yeah, I'd never heard of him." He's like, "Oh, he's been in 175 RI." I was like, "Okay, cool." And he told me that story, and I was like, "Really? Wow. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like, I definitely want somebody like that, So he told me that story before I even met you. That's how he told me that he knew you would be a good platoon sergeant and he wanted to get you.
Hey, you remember that I put together that climbing LPD, that assault
Yeah.
climber,
Oh, yeah.
and I remember I walked down to meet you and him, and I remember him saying like, "Dale, where the hell did you find this place at?"
Yeah. Yep.
And I was like, "I don't know. I just typed in best climbing in Washington, you know,
Yep.
and that was the place." But man, what a phenomenal course! What a
Yeah.
great course! And
But, Dell, here's the thing you need to think of, as far as that goes is, and I guess I'm just bragging on you. We didn't let every platoon sergeant do stuff like that. Especially when you're talking about climbing, like that's inherently dangerous. And I know being a ranger is very dangerous, but when I told Felino about the course and we briefed the course and that you were going to do it, and also telling him I'm not going to be there because I'm running X course, Dell's the man. And he's like,
that's right.
yeah, okay, yeah, whatever. That's cool. I'm telling you that that's not always the case, that we're gonna trust somebody that's got people, hanging hundreds of feet in the air climbing on rocks.
No, yeah, yeah. I think, and that's one thing I love about the regiment, the trust that
Yeah.
you know that they allow people to have, and it definitely, definitely is what makes the Ranger Regiment good.
Yeah, I agree. So coming up to 275, I know how Sunny felt about it, at first, but I know some of the feelings she had about it. She did like it up there, a lot of things about it. But what did you think, growing up in the South, 175 RI, coming up to the left coast, as people called us, up at 275, and some of the things that you saw?
Uh, well, I had to go through RASP 2 again
Oh,
to
yeah,
become
yeah,
to become a platoon sergeant, and I
yeah.
remember, at the board at the end, everybody on the panel was like, "How long have you been in Georgia?" And then they were like, "Yeah, you definitely need to go to 275." And so 2,800 miles drive, PCS your family, not an easy defeat, but definitely was something that made my my marriage and my family stronger.
Yeah.
And I remember showing up and at 275, and I didn't know where to live. I didn't know anything about 275, so I ended up renting a house out in Roy, probably because they had bull riding and
Yep.
rodeos, and
It's
I
a
really
fucking great place to live. I love Roy.
but I remember Sergeant Major Polito, he was like, I think he lived in DuPont. He's like, where are you living at? And I was like, in Roy. He goes, get used to sleeping in your office. I was like, okay.
It's actually quicker.
It is when they open that back gate up. It ended
Yep.
up being quicker. And but okay, let's just get this out the way. So what's the difference between 175 and 275?
All right. I love it.
All right, the big difference is obviously most Rangers from 175 are from the South. Most Rangers from 275 are from the West Coast. All right, so the difference is flat bills versus curve bills. I mean, it's so culturally slightly different, but the Ranger culture is not different. As far as rangering, I didn't notice any difference. All right, Ranger was Ranger. The breaching techniques. I mean, everybody had their like own little SOPs and stuff like that, but like I personally didn't see a difference in Rangers. The other differences was the ranges and getting used to it, working on a different post. Fort Stewart, Georgia versus Yakima. We used to bitch about driving an hour to go to the closest range from Hunter Army Airfield to Fort Stewart, Georgia. And then you guys, you couldn't even shoot freaking M3 Carl Gustav unless you drove 3 hours to Yakima. Yeah. So I was like, okay, what's the difference? And then you guys are dealing with butterflies. We're dealing with, we're dealing with the red cockaded woodpecker.
Yeah.
So there was some slight range differences, that I had to learn. But to answer your question, the difference, there is no difference in rangering. I think to close out the 275 thing, I would say I absolutely 100% enjoyed being up there. I know for a fact that I was given a great platoon. I mean, that platoon was great before I even showed up.
It was.
They were freaking phenomenal. Great NCOs. A lot of those NCOs are senior leaders in the regiment today. So absolutely enjoyed it. Another, after Sergeant Major Flino was Sergeant Major Nash.
Uh-huh.
I remember after a company live fire, you were the first sergeant. Badass company live fire. We don't have to talk about it, but it was badass.
Is that the one at Hunter Liggett?
It was. It
was
so
yeah,
fun.
that
one of the
like
best live fires ever done.
The fucking matrix of 240s. Oh, that was amazing. Yeah.
Man, it was just like I don't even know how many bunkers we knocked out. Was it like 10 bunkers? I don't even know.
It was awesome.
Mine were obstacle bunkers, hills. It was freaking badass. But I remember Sergeant Major talking to me afterwards. He said, "Hey, Dell, are you going to stick around and be a first sergeant?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever the Ranger Regiment needs me to do, Sergeant Major." So that was the decision. I went out and brought a house, and yam. So I had a house built, brought a house. I figured I'd be in 275 a lot longer, and then the list came out, for master sergeants, and he was up at regiment doing the senior manning slating, and I remember him calling me on the phone, and he kind of knew I still had aspirations to go to Delta selection. And he asked me, he said, "Hey, Dale, I got some good news and I got some bad news." He goes, "The good news is that you're one of the NCOs that they want to stick around to be a future first sergeant. The bad news is there's nobody on the bench at 175. What are your thoughts?" And I was like, he's like, "Hey, go home, talk to your wife, discuss it, and then we'll talk about it later." And I was like, "Hey, Sergeant Major, I don't need to discuss it. If that's what the Ranger Regiment needs me to do, I'll do it." And he goes, "You'll do it?" And he said, and case closed right there. I decided to sell my house in Washington and move, 2,800 miles back to Georgia to 175 to be a first sergeant.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about your time in 175, but we got a couple more things we're going to talk about in, a 275. And one of those things is, we talked about the rock climbing course because we did a lot of awesome things. We really, we had a lot of fun on duty and, even off duty, and we could We could always tell this story about how we missed like the biggest elk in the history of elk because Sam Wenzel didn't hand us the
Oh, man.
pistol. You remember that damn that son of a bitch. But anyway, I don't want to talk about that one. But you remember Man Days?
I do. Man Skill Mondays.
Man Skill Mondays. Let's talk about some of the things that you did. I think Charlie Company guys would love to hear you talk about it and reminisce about it. But also, there's a ton of value in the things that we did. So I'd love to hear for you to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, we did a lot of stuff, and to be honest, I guess I'm retired now, so I can talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
None of it was illegal. I don't think.
well, no, yeah,
Maybe.
I don't
Maybe.
know. No.
I don't think so.
Well, one of the things I want to do is like a
The,
survival.
the statute of limitations has ran off.
One of the things I want to do is like a survival training for my guys, and I ended up buying a bunch of chickens, and we had the chickens, and we had a day. I can't remember the range.
It was Regensburg, the mount site.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So we're doing CQB training. I had these chickens in the cages. I had them hidden in the wood line. And I remember actually Sergeant Major Felino showed up, and I was like, "Oh God, I hope those chickens don't make no noise." And we spent a whole day of just flowing, doing Battle Drill 6, and it was freaking awesome. I allowed the team leaders to kind of work with their guys to get them comfortable, and then we did a big culminating exercise at the end. And at the end of the day, like we end up staying at the range, camping out there. We had a fire. I brought out a big low country boil pot, and we brought carrots, celery, and we went into a class on how to kill chickens. I was going to do it the way they taught me in Ranger School, just put your boot on its head and then rip its head off.
Yeah.
But I actually had a private that was in my platoon, Jensen.
Yep.
Yeah, he grew up. I want to say he's Montana. He grew up somewhere in the north, and he had his parents owned a chicken farm, and he takes this chicken and he like sticks his head under its arm so it can't see, and he just like keeps it really calm, and he just breaks its neck. So it's like very humane, easy way for the chicken to die. And then it was pretty awesome. And then we started like talking about, hey, do you want to skin it? You want to pluck it? Like, how do you want your chicken? And then dissecting it. It was freaking awesome. And then we cooked the chicken, and that's when you and the company commanders, the Haley showed up. Yeah. And then we all had freaking a Ranger dinner, and it was freaking awesome.
It was awesome. It was awesome. That was, and then the other platoons, they adopted it and they wanted to do something similar, so then we had rabbits, getting fucking massacred, but, we were teaching people how to build fires. We were teaching them right way to set up a poncho hooch.
Oh, yeah,
we were teaching them, slaughtering animals. You and I take that stuff for granted. I grew up that way, like doing that stuff. You did, but a lot of kids, man, that was the first time ever doing that stuff, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I was teaching Rangers how to build a hammock out of a poncho, which was pretty awesome. And then obviously we had to go full Ranger, and we did a patrol base and priorities of work and security and all that stuff. So yeah, it was phenomenal.
Yeah, we definitely had a lot of fun, especially like doing the snowshoeing and skiing and stuff that we did up at Mount Rainier training, because we were the mountain company, remember, I don't know if you remember that they wanted us all to be prepared for different environments, be experts in different environments. And Charlie Company was the winter warfare mountain guys. So we had a lot of fun though.
Well, hold on now. I got promoted and had to go up to staff.
Yeah.
You guys got to go do some training on Mount Rainier, and I was super jealous.
Yeah.
And I remember I was supposed to be like a guide for the battalion chaplain to walk some soldiers up to the top of Mount Rainier. I was super excited about it, and EIB, I'm in staff now, so now I'm doing EIB, and I wasn't going to have time to do it with the chaplain, so I grabbed 2 officers from staff, and we left the very next day and went and summited Mount Rainier, and that was pretty awesome. I felt bad because I wasn't able to be a guide to lead Rangers up to the top of the mountain, but I wanted to do it. You can't say you live in Mount Rainier, or I'm sorry, in Washington, and not climb that mountain.
Yep,
right?
absolutely.
So I was extremely happy that I knocked that out. And honestly, you can look at that mountain completely different after you get off of it. You know,
That's a fact.
and so yeah, so that's one thing I love about 275. Tons of climbing,
Mm.
tons of. I mean, you want to talk about God's country? That is God's country. It is so beautiful. Outdoor. I went elk hunting, freaking fishing, salmon fishing, steelhead fishing. Like I've done everything that and more as far as manly skills in at 275. So 275 is a phenomenal place to go, especially for any rangers listening to this podcast. If you're hesitant, you grew up at 375 or 175, go to 275. Vice versa. You're in the mountains of Washington, go to the beach of Savannah.
Yep.
Um,
All right. So going back to no, and I agree. I spent 17 years living up at JBLM, and man, I just got thousands of stories about living outdoors that are just amazing. And a lot of times in downtown Seattle and downtown Tacoma. One particular story is your farewell, and me.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Is it even worth talking? Should we even talk about that?
It's up to you. I want to talk about you, and I'll fill in the blanks of the things that you probably don't remember.
Well, let me just say, first of all, I had no clue that I thought. So my squad leaders called me and they said they wanted to take me out to eat.
Yeah.
Like a farewell dinner, and I was like, cool. And I told my wife, and bro, we ended up downtown Tacoma at this bar called the Swiss.
Yep.
And
that's where we started. Yep.
Yeah, you kind of walk in the front door, and then it has like a back part where the band plays. And it was my entire platoon. My entire platoon was there plus more. And they had a chair that said Dango Dell on it. And then they brought me this beer, this massive beer. And that's kind of how it started. And then, we started drinking a lot of dancing. You end up showing up at some point, and we end up going bar hopping. So I remember bits and pieces, but what I will say I remember is I think I tried to ride a bull, and I remember you gave me a ride home, and that's all I remember.
Yeah, so we ended up at the Cowboy Bar. I don't know what it's called now. It changes names. They all change names a lot. Swiss is not even open anymore, from what I've heard. But yeah, they had this riding bull, and man, you were determined. You're like, I've always wanted to ride a bull. I'm riding that bull. And okay, that's fine, but we couldn't get you off of it. You were getting your ass handed to you. You were flying off that thing, like, across the bar, and you would freaking drag yourself back over there and get back down on that thing. And I'm like, he's going to be so bruised up tomorrow. He's going to think he got in a fight. And then eventually we made the call. We're like, all right, we need to get Dell out of here. So, we get you in the truck, Sarah drives, we take you back to the house. And I just remember walking you up to the stairs, and Sunny came down, and she's like, is he okay? And I'm like, he's going to be pretty sore tomorrow. He tried to ride a bull, and he wouldn't stop trying to ride that bull. And yeah, he's probably on the verge of alcohol poisoning. You pretty close, and I just remember talking to you the next day, and you're like, what happened to me?
So they got me this great plaque, with a picture of all my platoon on there. And then they end up getting me this bayonet that they got off some kind of, I don't know, they described it to me. This was before I started drinking, so I remember a little bit of it. But basically they bid it on it, and it was a knife that was carried by a Ranger in World War II. And it has a bullet hole through the thing. And I thought it was very fitting because we were the Mad Slashers to get me that Ranger bayonet, and pretty badass.
Yeah, that's amazing. Those are amazing times. So talking about, 175 and going to 175 and being a first sergeant there.
Yeah. So, when I showed up, the battalion was deployed overseas. I went up to the staff, the ops sergeant major with Sergeant Major Stoba, and he pretty much told me I was going to be the AOPS, which I was just the AOPS at 275. So I was very familiar with doing the job. And And that's when I realized there was two other people on the bench. There was Master Sergeant Foster, and then another ranger that's killing me right now. But there was two other rangers on the bench, and then I was like, oh my god, am I going to take a company? But yeah, I took a company October 13th, and the best part is I took Alpha Company, and my company commander at the time was Wilson. He was probably one of the best officers I've ever worked with. And shortly after, my next company commander was Captain Urquhart, who is now Major Urquhart. And I don't think anybody knew this, but we were actually team leaders together in Charlie Company 175. And we grew up together in Ranger Battalion. And I taught him how to do to build charges and blow doors.
Right.
And I ended up being his squad leader when he put in his OCS packet. And now, full circle, they made us a command team together. So you're talking like we're great buddies, a first sergeant and a commander together. And I know a command team relationship is important at that level, but I truly lucked, I consider winning the lotto. I mean, I was a first sergeant with my freaking Ranger buddy. Obviously I can't be like, oh man, we were best company, but like I would, ask the Rangers of that company. I'm telling you, man, it was awesome. There was no mom and dad games with me and him because everything we did, we saw eye to eye, and man, I enjoyed our time working together. So my first year as a first sergeant, I get a call on a Friday from the CSM, it was Sergeant Major Davis. He was like, hey, you're gonna be the next Delta Company first sergeant. And I was like, okay, when? He's like, oh, Monday. I'm like, what? But it actually ended up being like a week later. So it was kind of hard to leave something that I was trying to build and work. And you finally you got rid of the people that didn't need to be there. You're building this team and you got phenomenal NCOs. You got the right people in the location. A lot of work's been done in. You're about to see the benefit of the results of all the hard work you put in, and then you have to go. And I'm sure every leader can say that's the way it is with every position. So I went over to Delta Company, and it was almost like starting over. They actually 175 actually did something great. I thought they end up basically taking all the officers on staff and NCOs, and they end up doing a psych test, and they wanted to match the personalities of the NCO and officers that they were going to put in charge of Delta Company. Delta Company at this time was not a line company. It's the most complex company in the Ranger time. It's a specialty company, right? The mortars, the recce, sniper, Rista, the dogs. So it's the most complex company, and they wanted to put the right folks in there. And so me and Captain Housley, I guess, on the psych test, we ended up meshing, and we ended up working together. But looking back on it, I can't think of anybody that I didn't get along with throughout my entire career that I didn't work with. And I'm sure a lot of other folks know, like there's a lot of stuff you got to go through to get to the Ranger Regiment, right? Yep. You got to go through RASP. You got to prove yourself every single day. You have to prove yourself physically, mentally. You take these psych tests, and if you don't pass, you don't meet the muster, then you don't come. And then if you're an officer coming to be a PL or a freaking company commander, it's not your first time. Yeah. You've done it in the big Army, and not only that, you were the number one of that battalion, and you got, you went through the selection, and now we got the best of the best, and so no easy feat getting there. Became the first sergeant at Delta Company, Yeah, I mean, and absolutely loved it. And I will say it was a complex company. There was a lot of stuff that had to happen. I made a lot of mistakes as a first sergeant over there because, just to be short, I was never in a specialty platoon. I was a line dog the whole time.
So you had a lot to learn.
I had a lot to learn. So I was learning on the fly, and I just kept reminding myself, hey, first sergeant, being a first sergeant's been a first sergeant, administratively, making sure triple alphas are good, making sure that, Rangers are re-enlisting, make sure they're in the right uniform, right place, time, all that stuff. Just do the right thing, right? And so that was pretty easy. But I have tons of Rangers that are gone at 20, at any given moment. And I used to tell them, if I don't have a 1610 on my desk, you're AWOL, like freaking, you know. And then figuring out the budget, because Delta Company gets twice the budget because they send more folks to school, and so yeah, there was a lot of learning. But without a doubt, without going into a bunch of Ranger stories, I definitely learned a lot. There's definitely a lot of things I could have done better as a first sergeant. Um, and then I guess I'll kind of lead into, coming to the near the end of my career. So I'm past 24 months as a first sergeant, and I'm getting looked at for CSM. And I submitted my packet. I was motivated, ready to go. And then I was trying to sit down with my wife. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to go be the ops sergeant major, if I'm going to go to GSOFC, or if I'm going to go to USASMA out at Fort Bliss. I have no clue. But I sat down with my wife and I tried to explain to her how the Army works, after 17 years of being married. And I'm explaining to her the pros and cons of each. And I said, hey, if they ask me to be ops sergeant major, I'll be the hardest working NCO in the battalion. It is a lot of work. I'll be gone late hours, and then just GSOFC, I'll have to do online college. And I was already doing online college. It was kicking my ass. And I was like, the other option is that we go to Fort Bliss 9 months. I get to meet my peers in the Army. I made the sergeant major list with a bunch of guys that I was in 5th RTB with. So I get to see, how I rack and stack up against, my peers in the Army. And I lived in New Mexico for a while, so I'm very familiar with the area. So deep inside, I wanted to go to USASMA. I wanted to, that was kind of the way I was leading the conversation, to go to go over there. Mind you, we just went from Savannah, Dahlonega, Washington, back to Savannah. We're 9 miles down the way from my in-laws. Essentially Sonny's back at home. We got a beautiful house. The kids are in school. Everything's great. She's always allowed me to do what I wanted to do. And she did during this time as well. She asked me, she goes, hey, you'll be close to 20 years. Can you not retire? And without even like fully thinking about it, or, without even like putting any thought into it, I just said to her, absolutely not. I was like, I did not stay in the Army this long to retire as a damn first sergeant. Not going to happen. And I was very blunt about it. And that was kind of the end of that conversation. And, a couple of months went by, and, I started thinking about it, and I started making phone calls to Rangers that, that were in charge of me, or Rangers that I served with in the regiment that are civilians now. Most all of them very successful. And then one guy ended up saying something to me that I remember. He goes, hey, Dale, people in, corporate world don't know the difference between a PFC and a CSM. And that kind of stuck with me for a little bit. And then another NCO told me, like, any day you work after 20 years, you're working for half your paycheck. So that kind of stuck with me. And not to say that it was all about money or anything like that. At 16 deployments, and then being an RI, constantly gone from my family, the number one thing that kind of weighed heavily on me was, hey, it's time for me to be a husband and a father. And that was kind of the decision. I'm calling recruiters, I'm calling HRC. Then the list comes out, right? And I make the sergeant major list. And then I have every CSM that, the true legends of the 75th, emailing me, calling me, texting me, saying, hey, congratulations. And then the same person that I had a conversation about leaving with as a to be a platoon sergeant was Sergeant Major Alba, who's now the RSM. I had to have that conversation with him because he's trying to figure out, hey, am I going to send this guy to GSOFC, or am I going to send this guy to USASMA? He's got to figure out his NCO manning because the list just came out. And I'm on the phone with him. I'm up in the S3 office, and I told him, I said, hey, Sergeant Major, I'm going to decline promotion and I'm going to retire. And I'm like, I'm full circle again. Not something easy to say. To be honest with you, it was the hardest thing to say. It was the number one thing that I was dreading for so long. It was like a gray cloud over my head, your heart stuck in your throat. The number one thing that I love, that I've become part of, that I grew up in, that I've been immersed in for the last 20 years, I am now saying that I'm going to go do something different.
Yeah.
So extremely hard for me. And again, Sergeant Major Alba, he said, Dell, is this what you want to do? And his exact words he said to me is like, Dell, you and Sonny have been rowing for a long time. If this is what's best for your family, this is what you ought to do. And you know, I got a lot of respect for him. And I said, thank you, Sergeant Major. And that was kind of that. And he goes, if you decide to retire, I want you to stay there at 175, retire out of 175. And then the next hardest thing happened, right? Sergeant Major Spencer takes over 175. He was my squad leader. He's my Ranger buddy. And I'm like, oh my God, I could have been an Ops Sergeant Major for a legend,
Yeah.
another legend of 75th. And so now I'm like, fuck, how do I tell my buddy that my boss, like, man, I can't support you. But so he ended up, he supported me 110%. And, we sat down, we've done a lot of good counseling about, being a civilian and retirement. And he asked me to kind of lead the way on the Big Five training innovation cell. We started there at the battalion level. It's basically like the RAID, the Ranger Acquisition Integration Detachment, what
Yep.
used to be called the RS8. He wanted me to do something similar at the battalion level so we can kind of, test equipment, kind of cut out the middleman, if you will, and get things up through the channels quicker. And so that's what I did. And at the same time, he asked me to kind of initiate the Ranger for Life program, and he wanted me to start a Ranger for Life symposium, for everybody that's 6 months or out getting out of the Army. So I put tons and tons of time into building what is now called the Selease Training Area, a multi-million-dollar project to build a sub-T training facility for Rangers to train on. I was still in uniform, but I was essentially a project manager. I mean, I'm dealing with different people. They're showing up. I'm kind of like practicing to be a civilian, and it was awesome. And I got to see, what used to be called Sleepy Hollow turn into something great. And I remember when he left for that deployment, and he was kind of giving me his guidance, and I was like, Sergeant Major, whatever you think it's going to look like, I'm going to make it better. And that was kind of my way of paying it forward.
Yeah.
I've already feel like shit that I'm leaving something that I love, but I'm like, hey man, if you're gonna leave something, leave it better than you found it. So,
Absolutely.
so the Ranger for Life Symposium, man, tons of money to to get the venue to have it at. I'm networking with all these CEOs from Big Five, Fortune 500 companies, tons of guest speakers. I got this, quorum that how it's going to work out. I'm talking to Sergeant Major Mike Hall, the regiment, former regimental sergeant major, and great plan. And then like a week out, this is in the midst of COVID-19. We're a week out, and Sergeant Major Spencer calls me. He's like, "Hey, we're going to have to cancel this because we got folks coming in from all over the United States to be part of this." And they didn't really have a good understanding of how COVID was going to knock out everybody. And man, you talk about hours and hours of,
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I mean, sometimes leaving at 2100 at night, just freaking, putting this stuff together, and it all didn't happen. The good news is I retired, and Sergeant Major Mike Hall called me and said like, "Hey, we took basically your product and we dusted it off and we ran it, and it was phenomenal." So,
And they're still running it, and it's going remarkable.
well, I just think it's awesome that. Well, I wasn't the first one. Regiment was leading. I think it was Sergeant Major King ran the first one, but I was doing the one for 175,
Yeah.
and I took his AR comments and I was just trying to make it better. But I think it's good that you could create something, and even a year later, you could take it and kind of run with it.
Yeah.
So,
So when you kind of look at, your entire career as a whole in the 75th. Um, and now, you got a little bit of time separated. What did this overall brotherhood of Ranger Regiment, mean to you?
Hmm. The word that comes to mind is standards. Um, I constantly was surrounded by confident type A personalities, people that I consider giants, that I previously noted. You truly do not understand the magnitude of how great something is until you walk away from it. I did it once as an RI. I did it again after I retired. I was a 38-year-old man doing PT with 18-year-old kids,
Mm,
uh, going through, RIP, RASP 2 twice to be a platoon sergeant, a first sergeant. And, you know, the brotherhood, man, when I think of the brotherhood, I think of standards. Um, and every single day, you gotta prove yourself every
yeah.
day.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, I got two kind of final questions before we close this up. But the one is a new one that I kind of developed. I've only asked it once previously, so you'd be the second ranger that I've asked this. But if you could stand in front of all rangers, past, present, and future, I don't know, we have some auditorium where we can do
Mhm.
this. Okay, what would you say to them?
Um, just to come full circle, um, I didn't have a Ranger contract, uh, but I knew that's something that I wanted. Um, my message would be you could do anything that you want, anything that you put your mind to. All you have to do is do it.
Hmm.
I know that sounds kind of cliche, but
No.
it's true. But it's truly that simple. It's really the secret to life. If you truly want something, go get it. The world is yours for the taking. Um, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of work, hard work. And to be honest, if it was easy, would you even want to do it?
There
Uh,
you go.
the greatest things about Rangers is that you're a multiple time volunteer, and that you can constantly be depended on, no questions asked. Command Sergeant Major Merritt said it best at one of the LPDs that he did for my guys, reenlistment LPD. He says, "You're not only a ranger for life, but you're a recruiter for life." And I can tell you that as a contractor right now for Rexford Group, that is 100% true.
Mm, that's good. Well, you kind of stole a little bit of the thunder. I wanted to ask, where you at and what are you doing now?
Yeah, I'm currently a contractor for Wexford Group. I'm a jet advisor, and basically I just take all my lessons learned that I've learned for 20 years as a Ranger Regiment, and
Hmm.
I pass it on to the Army. My first trip overseas, I was supporting the ODA. The second trip, I was supporting a CAV unit, Conventional Army. I know. I said that, hey, family, husband, father, stay home more, retire. Absolutely true. The difference being a contractor for me right now is like when I'm at home, I'm
You're
at
home.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not, getting phone calls on the weekend. I'm not coming in late at night. I'm not doing MLATs and, doing all this reverse cycle training. I'm at home. So, but when I'm gone, I'm gone, which is still hard. So I currently, I'm in the process of figuring out the next step. I had no ambitions of being a contractor forever. I'm still trying to figure out where I fit into my pipeline in the civilian world. Um, um, but I got some good options open, and I don't want to give away anything on this open podcast.
Yeah.
'Cause, but we'll see what the future holds.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And it's been awesome to sit here and talk to you, and just reminisce and talk about your journey, through the 75th. Do you have anything in kind of closing you want to tell everybody?
Um, Yeah, just a couple things. I'll probably just say a couple things that people that inspire me. Command Sergeant Major Merritt, my first sergeant, he used to say, "You got to be a good American before you can be a good Ranger."
Yeah.
My first platoon sergeant, Command Sergeant Major Frank James, who's who's been instrumental throughout my career, who's helped pave the way for me, and he's always been a good Ranger buddy to talk to and bounce ideas off of. And Command Sergeant Major Spencer, who allowed me, just like you did, allow me to just do something and have complete trust in me. So I think that was instrumental. And Command Sergeant Major Johnson, who was a platoon sergeant for me, who a lot of the stuff that he did as a platoon sergeant, I stole from him, and I try to incorporate as a platoon sergeant for you. So yeah, I think talking about the legends of the 75th, to me, those are the true legends, right? Those are, and there's so many more. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on here, and God bless.
Yeah. Well, it's been awesome to have you on, and I just really appreciate being able to catch up with you, Ranger buddy. And I know for a fact everyone's going to enjoy hearing and catching up with you. So thank you everybody for tuning in to the Legends of the 75th podcast. Please share this episode so we make sure that it gets out to all the Ranger buddies and they know about this, because despite popular belief, not everybody does know about it. Rangers lead the way.